Hey everyone, Drew B's Apiary here. Today this is going to be kind of like a part 2 of checking fall stores. It's been, pretty much 2 weeks or so since I was last out here. I wanted to come out here sooner, but just didn't get a chance to. So, the last video, which is the most recent upload, is kind of showing where everything stood at the time. Really no change with Green Hive. They still had a lot of work to do, which is why they're only a single brood chamber there on the left. Blue Hive was probably the most prepared. They have a completely full top box super. Brood chamber was very full. Yellow still had an empty super, largely empty super up top, as well as this red hive here on the right. So really all this video is just me doing one more check. Like I said, it's 2 weeks later. The bees aren't feeding nearly as much because we're having a lot of nights where the temperatures are definitely dipping pretty low, and a lot of days that aren't really getting higher than that 55 degrees. So there are very few days that, when the temperature is actually breaking over 55 and the bees are actually drinking. Not many of those days. So this is just me kind of checking to see where we're at. If the bees need something to do, I'll give them something to do, even though this, we're already on November. Oh, I think this is already the 2nd or 3rd. I have to check my calendar. It's terrible that I don't know off the top of my head, but we're already into early November. So at this point, it's all last minute stuff, before Thanksgiving, after which point, most of the bees here in Georgia should be pretty much, set up for winter. There shouldn't be that much more inspecting to do. So realistically, if I come out here once every 7 to 10 days, I probably have, at most 3 more of these inspections, with this being one of them, before these hives are pretty much sealed up for good. So for the winter, unless we get a random warm day where I can do a quick inspection. But let me go in here real quick. I'll open the video, see if there's anything worth showing, and we'll go from there. One thing I will be doing is, since we are getting into that time of the year, it's cold weather, I'm going to be taking these queen excluders off. I like having them in place. It helps to know where your queen is at for anyone that does use queen excluders. But when we get to these kind of really cold temperatures, you kind of need to remove them, because you don't want a situation where your queen can't move with the cluster. And so, not that that shouldn't happen, but as heat rises, bees are going to do what they can to stay warm, and you don't want the, anytime during the day or night, the cluster to move to a position where she can't get to, because if that happens, then she's going to freeze to death. So these need to come off now that we're already in November. So this is still pretty light. The bees aren't really taking the sugar water like I would have liked. And I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're in that time of the year too where, it is hard for the bees to take sugar water. So I was kind of hoping I could get this red hive a little bit more full, but that might be easier said than done. So I'm not going to quit on it though. I will still feed for a little bit longer. I'm just saying there's really, it might be one of those situations where it is what it is. I mean, in that super alone, there probably was only, I would say, I'm going to show you up close. The end ones were largely empty. They started filling these out a little bit, like the middle 5 or 6, but it's not a lot of nectar that's in there. So I'd yank one out to show you, but in the position the box is in, I'm just going to leave it alone. So let me do my inspection in here, see how they're looking in there, and reassess. Bottom brood chamber for the red hive. relatively empty, but I mean, there's plenty of capped honey in there. There's some capped eggs. I'm not seeing any fresh eggs in here, from our last inspection like 14 days ago. And you know, we're in that time of the year where queen might not be laying much anymore because she knows the group of bees that she has, she's gonna, you know, they're planning to see how much they can, you know, get through the winter with. So no reason to expand too much knowing that. So I'm just gonna finish checking this, decide what I'm gonna do with all the empty frames, because I'd say in the bottom brood chamber, there are probably 2 of the 10 are just straight dry, nothing in them. So 8 of the bottom brood chamber frames are filled out either with honey, nectar, you know, capped brood. And then, as I mentioned before, the top box, the super, is relatively empty. So just gotta figure out what I'm gonna do, because I'm not sure why, when they have the space, it seems they have the bees, you'd think they would fill it out with a little bit more nectar, but these ones don't seem to want to do that. So we'll move on to the yellow hive next, check their status, and then go on from there. Now moved on to yellow hive. Good news is top super is maybe like 50% full. Middle brood box is heavy. That thing is very full. I'm right now in the bottom brood box, just taking a look. I've got, see if I can find it again. The camera can pick it up and see if I can find her. But there's a bee on here with some propolis on her, like there she is. It's kind of hard to see in the picture, but let's see if I can get her. She's right there. See the little orange on her legs right there? That's the sticky glue substance. So she's gonna find a place to put that to help seal up the hive. Also a little bit of pollen. I've seen some pollen on a few of these bees' legs, but just thought that was interesting. That's all. Just wanted to share. So I'm gonna finish this one up, and I'm going to try to get into the next hive. And then make my final decision about what I want to do. I'm not sure if anyone's seen this white pollen substance. I don't actually know if that's pollen or if that's just, I don't know what that is. But if you guys know, comment below. I've just never seen it or paid attention enough to it. A few of the bees in here have some on their legs, on their pollen baskets. And like I said, it's just straight white. So be very curious what that is for this time of the year. Well, makes sense why I couldn't find my queen in the yellow box, because I was never checking the upper brood chamber the last time. I assumed she was in the bottom box, and it was very evident today that that was not the case. So turns out this is a life lesson of why always make sure you know where your queen is before you put an excluder in place, because she was basically up here in the second box of the 2 laying. So I just yanked a frame out. So never in here, always in here. The excluder was there. So this whole time, the reason why this box has been so heavy is not only was she laying in here, but most of the bees were probably providing her with as much resources up here, and just forgoing that as just extra storage at this point. So now that I've removed the queen excluder, as we said we're doing, she is probably in there. I mean, I saw fresh eggs. I didn't see her, but it's good to know that that was the case, because I'd finished the whole bottom and was scratching my head because I was like, I don't see a queen in here, or I don't see any eggs in here. I just see honey. And this is not the time of the year you want to be dealing with a missing queen, because you're probably not going to be able to save that hive in time. So at this point, close this one up. I'm happy with that. We'll go into blue finally. All right, we've moved over to blue hive now. I'm not actually going to do a full inspection on blue. I feel pretty good about it. As mentioned in the previous video, the same holds true today, that this top box behind me, super full of honey and nectar. This bottom brood chamber also packed to the gills. It usually always was most of the year. And again, last time I saw my queen, I'm not going to go in here today and look for her again. It's just going to cause too much disruption in here. I am just going to clean it up. Like I said, I removed the queen excluder. And again, just to reiterate, the reason why we're removing the queen excluders is because of the temperature changes we're getting into, and we want the queen to be able to move around with the cluster. So if the cluster moves to where it's warm, she is going to likely go with them, and she won't be able to if there's something blocking her way. So, you know, I like having the queen excluder, but we need to keep our queen alive in these cold temperatures. So I'm just gonna clean this up real fast, so that way in the future, if I ever have to take this on and off, it won't get as much in the way as it has in the past. Some beekeepers don't do this kind of maintenance. It is more work than it's, you know, probably worth, especially if you have a bunch of hives. Since I have so few here, I can kind of get away with it. I'm sure if I had like 20, 30, 40, 50, you know, etc., I wouldn't take this time to do this. It would just be too time consuming. But either way, I'll knock it out real fast. And then after the green, I just have to make my final decisions on what I'm doing about adding honey supers from, like, if I want to redistribute these boxes at all, give them something to do. Finally at the green box. Let's see if we can get a little closer. Now the thing with the green box is I only opened it up today because I want to just check these far two corners and see if they put any sugar syrup in those. If they have, I will consider putting a honey supered box that's already mostly full. I don't want to put an empty super on top of this hive. They just, this late in the year is a bad idea, and they just aren't as proficient of workers as some of the other hives were. So I just wanted to just real quick check to see if there was any more work that could be done in here. And if there is, I'll leave them alone. If they're done, I'll give them something to do. All right, this one's empty. Yep, it's definitely empty. Let's check this one next. Actually, before I do that, let me check this one. Should have done that right away. My apologies. We'll be over here. And this one looks like they got a little bit more work done on it. Not much, but so that's, whether you want to see it as the, you know, 7th or 8th frame. Looks like you got a little bit of honey on the top, almost nothing on the, oh no, take that back. There's a little bit of nectar on the back. All right, just a little bit. So let's check the other side. I think they still have some work left to go. There's no reason to give them super. And again, this wasn't going to be an empty super. I need to specify that because giving them an empty super this late in the year, they just couldn't fill it in time. You know, if I'd given yellow or blue hive an empty super, maybe they might be able to do it in like 2 weeks with the way that they'll pack in the nectar. Especially right now, since the brood cycle is pretty much slowed down, you know, raising brood requires a lot of resources, a lot of nectar, a lot of pollen. And so since all these bees have slowed down, and I can tell they've slowed down, I'm actually seeing, you know, when I give them nectar, it actually shows up in there versus just getting converted into fresh brood, which is what normally was happening in the month of August and September. Everything I was feeding them just simply seemed like it was just becoming brood food. So now when I give them something, if they're drinking it, it's usually going into the frames. So that's empty. Let's check one more. Again, I'm not looking for the queen today. I'm sure she's in there. She's got a nice packed cluster. Just a little bit of nectar. Not much. So, yep, they're not getting a super though. It's just too much for them to do. All right, well that's it folks. I'll do final thoughts on this next one and see what I decide to do.